Good evening, everyone, and welcome to This Week from Rockdale with the Midweek Report. And we're joined by special guest host, Alex McDonald. And tonight, Alex and I are going to tell you everything we thought we know and we don't know. So that's
Special special guest. Hey guys, what's
so
up, Larry?
doing good, Al. Welcome to the Midweek Report on Wednesday. So this
Thanks,
makes
sir.
you get to get on. This makes you be on about every day of the week on something.
Yeah, pretty
So
much.
pretty much, yeah.
Pretty
So you,
much.
so you might as well come on a Wednesday show, and that way sort of hit everything,
I
right?
rammed the week out completely. Hey guys, hey
Yeah.
Lisa,
So
Laura.
yeah, we'll say hello to some people. We got Lisa Lancaster, Laura Skelton, Mitch McCarty. We got C.J. Lester, Jeffrey Coogan. We got William Campbell. We got is that Princess Sandy? That Sadie?
It is Princess Sandy.
Princess
Hey
Sandy.
Sandy.
So EFAT Walker. Good
Hey Fat.
day, EFAT Walker. And EFAT and I had a nice long talk today about everything that happened and what we thought was the process. And then EFAT and I talked about her race, and I'll talk a little bit about that tonight too. About what EFAT felt was going on and what she felt some thresholds she needed to meet, and they weren't met. So she felt comfortable with her run, and with some thresholds that didn't happen, it did not surprise her with the results that occurred. So James Corbett, good welcome to the show, Alex. So we'll start off by why don't you give the folks a little bit of thought about what you think happened last night and what that means.
So let me tell you what I thought going into this. I thought it was going to be a really bad day for incumbents, is what I thought. That was my initial presumption. But this has been a very strange election cycle, Larry. You've seen numbers. I've seen numbers. We've seen some party numbers and heard some data, and the data it's not typical. It wasn't in the lead up. It wasn't typical of election cycles in the past. I assumed it was going to be a very bad night for incumbents. Turns out I was wrong, and it was a great night for incumbents. Now, I've said on my other show, TPS Report with Danielle, I've said that I think Republicans are going to do remarkably well in November, except in Georgia. I think it's going to be tough for Republicans in Georgia because Democrats have the Democrat Party, they know they're going to struggle in November with the economy the way it is. It's just a disaster under Joe Biden's leadership. They have their eye on one prize, and that's Georgia. Turning Georgia blue. If they walk away with down 3 Senate seats, but they flip Georgia blue, they're going to consider that a victory and take that with them into 2024. A record number of Republicans turned out yesterday to vote against, in my opinion, to vote against Donald Trump, is what I think happened. Brad Raffensperger won. Brian Kemp took, 80%? 78%, I think it was. I got the numbers up here. Let me just verify that. Is this is Georgia Secretary of State. There's Senate.
Click the detail and it'll go to percent.
Yeah, I have to come down to
the governor.
State.
Yep, and then you click detail and it'll go to percent.
Yeah,
Yeah, you got to go down. It's okay. Yeah. You got to go past all the Congress people.
The problem is I'll skip right by it if I go too fast. Here we go. Governor, 73.71%, Brian Kemp.
That's very similar to the number that he beat Casey Cagle in the primary in 2018, Alex.
Yeah.
Very similar number.
Yeah, Brad Raffensperger avoided a runoff, 52.34%. The Trump-endorsed candidates didn't have a great night, Larry. They either lost or made it just into a runoff.
Well, Burt Jones is. They've actually declared that Burt Jones. There's not
They
enough.
he so
There's not enough votes
so he
left.
just squeaked through.
He's
So he
squeaking
just
bean,
squeaked past.
and Vernon Jones. I'll tell you, and you know I'm not a Vernon Jones fan, right?
Right.
So, but the Trump endorsement did get Vernon from nowhere to number two and a strong number two.
Sure, absolutely did. Herschel did great. Yeah, Herschel
Yeah,
did.
but
That's true.
Herschel
Herschel did
didn't need
very
an
well.
endorsement.
That's correct.
Herschel endorsed himself, and that was his own
Exactly.
endorsement was enough, right?
Yeah. I think it was a bad night for at the end of the day, and this is just my opinion. People are going to hate on me for it, and they have in the past. I think it was a really bad night for Donald Trump. I think Georgia Republicans are pretty much over 2020. You and I have talked about this. We've both said it publicly. It's time to move on. It's time to focus on 2022 and 2024. Move on and see what we can do. Now I'm really concerned that with President Trump's beef with Brian Kemp, I'm really concerned that Trump could actually cost us the governorship unless President Trump gets behind Brian Kemp and tells his supporters to get behind Brian Kemp. I think that's all she wrote. You and I know, Larry, all it takes is 4%. All it takes is 4% of Republicans to refuse to vote for Kemp, and that's it. Stacey Abrams wins. We're done.
You know, Alex, I've also saw some reports, and I belong to some leadership chats and stuff. Right, that's their closed group,
Right.
and some of that they're starting to get some data, which they will get the data in the next week to confirm some speculations. They are beginning to believe there was a concentrated Democrat effort to actually manipulate the Republican primaries. And then they will know within a week because they'll be able to look at the past voting history and look at Democrats who crossed over. And Republicans have done this successfully on a small scale before. They did it with Hank Johnson and Cynthia McKinney a few years ago. And there was another circumstance where they did it at a congressional race. If this is accurate and the Democrats pulled this off on a statewide level, it shows a massive amount of organization.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't account for the 21% to 74% split between Kemp and Perdue.
No, it does not. But it would account for some of those really tight races if 40 or 50,000 Republicans would have done that, is what they're sort of speculating. I mean, Democrats voted in the
Sure,
Republican.
I know what you mean.
That would have put that Burt Jones thing right there close to that runoff. That would have actually shifted the Ratzenberger race. Ratzenberger wouldn't have won without a runoff. So if
I mean, Raffensperger got 608,000 votes to Jody Heiss's 388,000 votes.
You have to count all of the other votes. So
there's 200 something thousand vote difference there.
No, Al. You have to count everybody's votes. Everybody's vote matters in that to get 50 plus 1. So if everybody else's votes added up to over, then it would have. I think that race is close enough that 40,000 votes would have put it in the runoff.
Okay. I don't see those. I don't see those numbers here. Even if it was an additional, even if you took 40,000 away from Brad and gave them to Jody Heiss, it wouldn't have put Jody over.
No, you have to add all the other candidates' numbers. All the other candidates' numbers add up to over 50. It's a runoff, not just one candidate.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's what I see. I mean, if it was, and they'll actually know what the true number of crossover vote was. We'll see. I mean, it was a big Republican number versus the Democrat number, and if Republicans can turn that kind of number out in November, then Al, I don't know. I mean, if they turn those kind of numbers out when you go percent wise against what the Democrats turned out, we'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, if Stacey Abrams would have had a primary challenger, I imagine the
Yeah, yeah,
Democrats'
they
numbers
would
would
have
have
had
been
good
way
numbers too.
higher. Yeah.
Yeah. But they
Yeah.
did have a lot of primaries. They
Mhm.
had the lieutenant governor's race, the attorney general's race, secretary. I mean, they had a lot of those state offices had primaries, and that they were disappointed in the turnout when they did have contested primaries in those statewide elections.
Mhm.
But you got to look out. Even though we talk about the number being high, when you really look at the total of number of voters in Georgia, really wasn't that high, really was it? I mean, it's
Oh no,
and that
no.
what
I mean, it was high for an off-year primary, but
dismal.
by number of registered voters, yeah, it's kind of
Well, I mean,
sad
you look in
to be
Rockdale
looking at
County.
it.
In Rockdale County, we have a little over 60,000 registered voters,
Yeah,
and we had 15,000 people turn out. I mean, that's but
right.
this is something I said a few years ago, and you may remember this. 4 or 5 years ago or whatever, I said that when they started the motor voter thing, and all these people were going to appear that they were all registered voters, it was going to be a misleading number because we were still going to only have these few people that showed up, and it was going to make it look like it was even smaller numbers because it makes it appear everybody's registered and engaged when that's not the truth. Everybody was registered because the system registered them. But I
Right.
think last year they changed that policy, and I think people complain about it, but you've actually brought some valid points up of why it shouldn't have been automatic, and you've actually used your circumstance and
Yeah.
situation for an example of that. Why don't you tell the people why it's not a good example for you to be automatically registered?
Well, because it would be a felony for me to be automatically registered. Well, I don't know that it's a felony, but it would be at very least a misdemeanor because I have a green card. I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm prohibited from voting in U.S. elections. And here's how it's supposed to work. I go and get my driver's license. I check I'm a non-citizen. Okay. But do I get registered? And I don't know the answer to that question, right? They don't tell me. That paperwork is supposed to go to your local board of elections. They are supposed to weed out the people that were registered incorrectly and remove them from the rolls. But if I was registered automatically through the motor voter legislation, I've committed a crime. I've committed it unwittingly, and I seriously doubt there would ever be a chance of me being prosecuted for it, but it would absolutely be a strike against me when I go to renew my green card or, apply for citizenship or whatever it is I choose to do. It would absolutely be a strike against me. I think it's as flawed as the real ID system of, when you have to take a dozen pieces of identification to get your license, to get that little yellow star. Imagine that imagery, by the way, to get that little yellow star on your driver's license. That is a remarkably poorly thought out piece of federal legislation also that puts, and I'm speaking on about this from a personal standpoint obviously, but it's the standpoint I'm familiar with, because the federal government says you can only renew your green card 6 months in advance, but it takes them 9 months to process it. And your driver's license expires with your green card. And so there's a 3 month gap there where you don't have a license. You actually do. They issue you a temporary 3 month license for a fee. Then you have to go back after that 3 months, once you finally got your green card renewed, and pay another fee to get your full license. It was really poorly thought out legislation. And, I understand why they did it. They just didn't think it through. like most things, unfortunately, the government does.
There's a lot of legislation that's just not clearly thought out when it's passed. That somebody, well, this sounds like a good idea, but when you go into practice, not practical.
Right.
That's what happens.
Right.
So, so we had some interesting local elections also, Alex.
Yeah, we did. We
Uh,
really did. Well, let's start with the SLOST because we know the SLOST passed.
Yep, and the no vote was 37 point something percent or something like that.
37.61 to 62.39. 10,698 to 6,449. That's I mean, it is what it is, right? The people went out and voted.
It is what it is. I mean, and I've talked to a lot of people, and they just say they don't understand. And I said, well, yeah, you understand because you became informed about the issue somehow. You knew something, but and we've talked about this many a time. You and I have, Alex, about how difficult it is to inform voters. For voters to actually to be informed on the issues and know what they're voting on.
Yep.
And they'll just go in and they have no idea. And then how that question was worded. I mean, just look at it. The first thing it starts talking about is the raise money for the sheriff, 911, fire, parks. I mean, doesn't say anything, but it's immediately the money's going to the sheriff and 911 and fire. So someone who's not educated on the topic, not even aware that that's not how you're supposed to introduce it. That you're supposed to list projects, but when you put those heartstring things right there initially, it's a tough challenge. It's a tough hill to overcome.
It really is. And again, reach is difficult. Reaching 90,000 people and trying to get a message across to 90,000 people, it's an uphill battle. It's a difficult climb. I think 37.61% voting against it. I think that's great. But Clayton said, I think it was Clayton that said in the chat
That was a lot of people.
that somebody said doesn't matter that a third of people voted against it. They're going to hear the majority. And we know, listen, we already know that this board of commissioners doesn't really care about the will of the people anyway. We already voted down a courthouse in Old Town by 70%. We had a two-thirds plus majority that voted down their plan, their bonds for a courthouse in Old Town. And guess what we're going to end up with, Larry?
And
we're going to end up with a courthouse in Old Town.
We're going to end up with a courthouse in Old Town. We'll talk about that in a second. We're not done with the SPLOST, but we're going to talk about these ballot questions. And somebody said, they'd like to hear about them. And I've got the results of the Democrat questions and the local Republican questions. And you know what? To be honest with you, those responses are very interesting too. When you look at what they say about those, it's interesting. So, but the SPLOST, Alex, I agree 100%. We knew it was a long shot when we took this battle on, and I'm still in discussions with my attorney. I talked about it, and we did talk about whether we should challenge it or not. First thing that he's going to do a little research because of all this junk now with the courts throwing things out with you not having standing. The attorney said the first thing he's going to do is he's going to ask some questions to see if it's even worth our while to pay the filing fees, because he's going to do it pro bono. But we still have to pay the filing fees. And he says there's no use for any of us to waste our time and money if they're not even going to hear it. So he's going to do a little reason. He's going to see first if they'll even entertain it before we do it.
Yeah. So the vote no committee should have standing because it was a legally filed committee. Individuals, the people of Rockdale probably don't have standing, but the committee that filed, I think absolutely would. And here's the thing:
But Alex, they actually ruled that David Perdue did not have standing in his own election to file an appeal.
Yeah. Well, listen. Yeah. You never
I
know.
mean, you know what
You
I mean?
never know
So
what card.
I mean,
You get.
that's why the attorney said with that ruling, before that ruling, he would have thought we had standing, but he's going to do a little checking before
Do a
we
little
go.
research and see. But yeah, you would think it would be easily challenged because it was introduced illegally. It was campaigned on illegally by members of the SPLOST committee. How that happens is beyond me. And if those people are allowed to remain on the SPLOST committee, I think that's a travesty that they broke the law and will now have their hands on 100+ million taxpayer dollars of the people of Rockdale. Ill-gotten gains at this point, if you ask me. But you know what? People went out and voted,
Well,
and they voted for the SPLOST. So
just to let everybody know that, I mean, the state entities are taking that very seriously, that illegal campaign.
sure.
It is not only being investigated by the Secretary of State's office, but I've been also contacted by the ethics office. The
Mhm.
ethics division is also investigating this also. So you have two branches of government, two entities that investigate elections. Both are looking at this very seriously, and there'll eventually be something done. Somebody's going to get fined. Somebody's going to, have to pay, some penalties, may have a misdemeanor on their record or whatever at some point. But you're right, Alec. The damage is done. The SPLOST is passed.
Yeah. And these folks, they may not think there is a paper trail, but there is a paper trail. We know exactly who it was. And whatever, we'll see what happens
Well,
from this point
the
on.
ethics guy actually told me he called me on Monday, yeah, and he told me he would be notifying the individuals on Tuesday they were being investigated.
Okay.
And,
All
and
right.
I'm going to let everybody know too that Charles, not Charles, but Fred Straub, Doug Smith, and then also Oz Nesmith has been thrown into the investigation.
Mm-hmm.
So those three individuals are being investigated. And this is just funny, and I'm going to say it because it was said. The investigator said that the Oz Nesmith thing doesn't surprise him. He's a frequent flyer with their office.
A frequent ethics flyer. That's funny. All right. Well, let's talk about because everybody's asking about
Questions?
the local questions. So why don't you make me full screen so I can bring these up and we'll go over them while they're on the screen.
Okay, let me
Just
click.
tell me which one you want to start with.
Let's start with the number 9. We'll go ahead and start with.
Oh, that taking it off the screen muted everything. So unmute the mics.
Well,
Yeah, just when you go off, just on the sidebar, unmute the stuff. That might be working. I don't know. Can you all hear us? I can't hear Larry. No, switch it back, Larry. Yeah,
no,
I don't think they can hear it. So
no.
I'll
But I
just, you know
hear
what? I'll
you.
just,
I hear you.
okay. They can then, okay, they hear me, but they don't hear you. But they need
Yes,
to hear you because you're the one with the questions in
I
front
have
of
the
you. But
question.
anyway,
Yeah.
so question 9, yes.
Yes, question 9. And question 9 is do you believe Rockdale County Board of Commission should expand from a 3-member board to a 5-member board?
Um, okay,
And
well, these if this is the question, results for that were yes, 58.8%, no, 41.2%.
yes, that
Okay.
and that and that's close to 60%. And I find that to be that's a respectable number that people would actually want 5 commissioners.
Hmm.
Um, so let's go on to question number 10, Alex.
Question 10, yep.
So, and that would be, do you believe the members of the Rockdale County Board of Commissions should be elected by district? Very
80
strong response here.
81.8% said yes, 18.2% said no. And remember, these are the Republican Party questions. So
Yeah.
theoretically, it was only Republicans responding to
Yeah,
this.
but I've today I spoke with a couple of elected officials who are Democrats, and they've told me they don't even, they talk to Democrats all the time, their constituents, and that their people believe they're in districts now, Alex.
Right.
So
Right.
and that's sort of why you get the Republicans answering that way. Well, they think they're in districts now,
Mm-hmm.
and the Democrats think they're in districts now also.
Right.
So let's go to question 11.
Question 11. Yep.
Do you believe Rockdale County Board of Education should replace Terry Oates as school superintendent of Rockdale County?
61% say yes, and 39% say no. 61%. That's a pretty resounding yes that Terry Oates should be replaced.
Let me tell you something. Do you know I did get a lot of calls from Democrats about the ballot questions, right?
Sure.
The number one question they were upset that they could not answer was
That
question
question?
11.
Yeah.
Question 11, well, there's two, 1 and 14. So, but I mean, 11 and 14. But 11, especially those with kids in school,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted to answer that question. And it wasn't a yes, Alex. I mean,
Yeah,
it wasn't.
no, absolutely.
You know what I
They
mean?
did
It was,
not want to vote yes.
well, they wanted, they wanted to vote yes.
Well, they wanted to vote yes, replace him.
Yeah, they wanted to replace him. So, but 61% is a heck of a number to say we don't want you. And that should send a message to the board and him that he's not very popular.
Yeah, listen, if no one else is going to listen to that number, the Board of Education should.
Yep, exactly. So number 12.
Number 12.
Okay. If Rockdale County would build a courthouse, do you agree with building a Parker Road by using SPLOST funds for under $40 million? And I was a little surprised by this answer.
Right. 43% said yes. They believe it should be at Parker Road. 56.12% said no. Now, here's my question about that. Those people voting no, are they saying no, we don't want one, period? Or are they saying no, we think it should be somewhere other than Parker Road?
Well, we're going to answer that question next.
We'll answer that question with the next question, right?
Yeah, let's go to then we'll discuss 12 and 13 together. 13, if Rockdale County would build a new courthouse, do you agree with building in Old Town Conyers by using bonds with a price tag over $150 million? And what are those answers, Alex?
This is number 13.
Yes.
Number 13. Do you read that question for me again, Larry?
If Rockdale County would build a new courthouse, do you agree with building in Old Town by using bonds with a price tag of $150 million?
It says here that 85.85% of people said yes.
They said no.
Said no. 14.15 said yes. So
they don't want you to build at either place, Alex.
It appears to be a contradiction, right?
I think I know. I've talked to people, and with what I've talked to people, this may make sense.
Yeah,
I've talked to a lot of people who wants to remodel. They want to keep their courthouse.
Yeah, and it would have been an ideal question, right? Build a new one, remodel the existing.
Yeah.
The problem is 12 and 13 can be interpreted any number of ways. I think that let me jump back over to here. I think the 56.12 that voted no to the Parker Road facility, they're actually voting no, period, across the board. They're saying no, it shouldn't be anywhere. And that is it's kind of solidified by the 86% that say no, we shouldn't be building in Old Town for 100 and however many millions.
I said 150, but it when talking to people who are in the know about things, when you talk about all they got's 110 million. But we've all talked about the infrastructure and what's going to happen, and that could be in excess of $100 million on its own. So it's going to be well over a $200 million project when all is said and done.
Yeah, Again, well, I've not done an infrastructure study, no traffic pad, no traffic studies, anything like that. I'm looking at it really just the overall scope based on projects that we've looked at and bid in the past. Considering the age of the infrastructure and, quite frankly, the scope of if what they're proposing is anything similar to what they were proposing back when they were doing the 140 floating the $140 million bond idea, we're talking about a major project, which is going in that area likely going to take years. But haven't they given themselves access to SPLOST funding from this? Doesn't the legislation for the PFA say that they can take SPLOST money?
But what they've said, even if they take SPLOST money, they're capped at $110 million with all sources.
Yeah, they're not going to be able to do anything near the scope they want for 110 unless they get it going and then have to I don't know, come begging hat in hand and say, well, we started it, now we need to finish it. I mean, heads up.
I see that coming. I see that. Me and you discussed this off air.
Oh, absolutely.
And I told you, I think that we can look for amended legislation after they get in process with this, because they're going to get in process and overruns, and they're just going to say, you've handcuffed us. We can't leave Old Town looking like this.
Yeah,
and the legislature they'll have no choice but to expand and extend.
Well, especially now our entire local delegation is Democrat. We don't have a Republican anymore. It'll be very easy, I imagine, for them to get that amended and get any cap taken off of it.
Oh yeah, I agree, and it's going to be a disaster. I mean, I've been involved in a few projects, Alex, where we've done some rerouted some roads and had to do some things, and we disrupted some small towns before. And I'm telling you, it had been 2 and 3 year projects, and when we left, those places were not the same.
Yeah. Listen, here's what's going to happen, Larry. After because they're dependent on home values to pay this debt. Right? They can't implement a new tax for this. They've already said, it's going to be paid for with increases in home values. When the housing crash hits in 12 months and our homes have an actual market value 50% less than they are today. So let's say your home's worth 150, but you'll be taxed at a valuation of 300. And that will have to continue increasing for them to simply service the debt on these things. That's where we're headed. That's where we're going to end up. This is, again, it's just remarkably poorly planned, poorly executed. They've done it in a way that completely bypassed the electorate, completely bypassed the voters. And we're the ones on the hook for
it. When several legislators said they would never do that, if you recall.
Yes. Yeah.
So
anyway,
let's go to question number 4. This 14 is an off the chain answer.
14.
Yep. Do you believe senior citizens 75 and older should be exempt from Board of Education property taxes?
95.54% said yes.
So that's actually 56%. I mean, 96%, my bad.
Yeah, 96%.
96%. And I'm going to give a few other little numbers, because people would question, well, that'll be a ballot thing. Would that actually pass on a ballot? Well, let me give you some numbers, okay? Of all voters who cast votes in Rockdale County, 35 point whatever percent are 65 and older. The next group, 55 to 64, is 25 point something percent. When you add those up, 61% of those who cast ballots in Rockdale County elections are 55 years old and older, with the majority of those being 65. So just those who cast the ballot are in that age group who would benefit. They're going to vote themselves that. So
Let's think of that's which is fair enough. The numbers are the numbers. Let's play this out though. Let's say that they comprise, so that's 60 something percent of registered voters.
That's not 60-some% of registered voters, Alex. I took that from actually those who cast ballots on a routine basis, and that's actually voters, not registered voters.
Okay,
No,
60 something. Let's say they comprise, I mean, what percentage of the housing market do you think those people comprise?
I don't think it's that because I think when we look at that, and I'd had some numbers and I don't have them here, but the people who actually homeowners is shrinking in Rockdale, and those companies are buying up. But Rockdale is a rental county.
Sure.
There are more companies who own homes than people own homes.
Sure. But do you think there 20% of homes are owned by 65 and older? Do you think 10% are owned by 65 and older?
And
Because
I'm going to tell you that was asked by the legislature when they introduced some legislation, and the assessor's office was never able to provide them that information. The Board of Education said that their numbers said it would cripple them, but they were never able to really provide the hard number to say what it is. So the legislature has asked for it, and they've asked it from the tax office and the BOE. Neither entity have provided anybody those numbers, Alex.
Yeah, and listen, the school system they're being a little bit disingenuous there, saying, "Oh, it would cripple us," because it wouldn't. The rest of us would have to make up the deficit. The whatever they lost in that tax credit, or however it works out, the rest of us would end up having to pay.
Well, and I've done a little research on this, Alex. Up to about 6-7 years ago, there was 100% exemption for seniors, and they somehow did away with it. Because I've built, some people have told me they got it, and actually I talked to one of our listeners out at West Avenue and said her and her husband had it. Her husband passed away, and then after she went to apply for it 2 years later, when she got the age, mysteriously it didn't exist anymore. So that has been, the Board of Education somehow was able to take that away.
That's interesting.
With some sort of board. So it's not been that long that's not existed here. And then also, that would not be a permanent exemption, because when people die and the houses are sold, it goes back onto the tax.
It would be, yeah, it would be dependent on whoever's living there.
Yeah, it's a temporary exemption that would only exist for a short time period, and it would be a rolling exemption because houses would come on, houses would come off. So I think it's workable. And I think especially when we look over the last 5 years with the declining enrollment of Rockdale County schools, where we've actually got some updated numbers where it's actually been like more than 1,400 enrollment decline. And when you do that times the 11,000, you're more up near 16 million.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I think it's workable. I'm just saying, I think the school system is just, they're full of shit, for lack of a better term, because they're going to get their money, and it would just fall onto the rest of us.
Well, Catherine Lynn just asked a valid question. Shouldn't there be a record of that, of the number of homes? Yes, there should be. But I think there's a reason that they didn't want to provide that information, because it wasn't as big a hit as they were trying to sell it as. That's what I think. Right. I think there's a reason they didn't want to provide the data, is because the hit wasn't as big as they were trying to sell it as that it would bankrupt the school system.
Right. So let me ask you this, Larry. Do you have the Democrat questions there as well?
I do have the Democrat questions.
That's what, because I'm curious about
they're 10, 11, and 12.
10, 11, and 12. Got it. Here's 10 and 11 on the screen.
Okay. And when we talked with number 10 actually goes along with one of our questions, Alex. Number 10 is, should a location other than Old Town, Conyers, be considered for development of a judicial administration complex?
70.45% say yes, it should. Another location should be considered other than Old Town.
So the Democrats say, I mean, what's it? 70% say other than Old Town, right?
Yep.
We go back to the Republican question about building in Old Town, which it's like 85% that say no.
Right.
So now this, because we have a question that both parties have asked that we can go look at, it's very apparent to me that the citizens of Rockdale County, not Republicans or Democrats, but the citizens, no matter what party they belong to, agree the courthouse should not be in Old Town.
Correct. Beyond the people that voted, beyond the shadow of any doubt.
This is the third similar question, because back in 2018, when they were asked to approve $140 million,
right,
they said no. Correct.
Correct.
So when asked these questions, should it be in Old Town, both Democrats and Republicans alike said no.
No.
So
Absolutely.
I think that's a clear answer, but they're not going to listen to it.
Oh, they don't care.
It's just like what Judge Mumford said at that one meeting. Well, there's not really room to put this courthouse in Old Town, but we're going to stuff it in there because that's where it needs to go. That's what he said, Alex.
Sure. You know, we have somebody that's supposed to be the chair of that task force who apparently isn't the chair of the task force. Judge Mumford is running that task force. In my opinion, Judge Mumford has some wild conflicts and should not be on that task force. But I told them, you know what, I'm going to withhold comment until after they're done. Let them do their work, and then I'll say something.
I actually have an issue with Judge Richard Reed being on the task force. The chief state court judge should be the judge that's on that task force. Judge Reed is not the chief state court judge. Judge Clarence Cuthbert is the chief state court judge. But I would like to take this time to make a special announcement. There was a write-in candidate for judge. That candidate did not beat Richard Reed, but that candidate did get a dozen votes. That candidate was my dog, Tucker Cox. Tucker H.H. Cox, because his name is Tucker Horatio Hambone Cox, okay? So I talked to another judge today. That judge said I should go ahead and buy Tucker a robe and declare that he is the canine judge of Rockdale County, since he got more votes than any other dog in Rockdale County.
That's
so I would
right.
like everybody to know Tucker Cox is taking Donald Trump's advice. He's declaring victory as the canine judge of Rockdale County. He will be getting any dogs who violate any laws. They need to come before Tucker Cox. Just throwing it out there.
Tucker H.H. Cox, write-in candidate. You did that quietly.
I did do that quietly, didn't I?
Yeah, I had no idea.
We did a post, and people responded to it, and we had people that went and voted for him. So they wrote in, and I specifically said to write in against Judge Reed. So he got the write-ins against Judge Reed.
I love it. Dan says he demands a runoff.
I think Dan's right. Tucker wants a runoff, but that's what we did. But but my issue with Judge Reed being on the committee is they bypassed the chief state court judge. And what I understand was Judge Mumford specifically asked that Judge Reed be on the ballot. I mean, on that committee. We have an ORR in right now, Alex, and there's been no response back to this ORR. Right. The ORR has been.
Look at James Corbett's question there. So who sells their land to the county for dollars? Well, we know one person who sold land to the county for dollars. Fred Straub.
Yeah.
Fred Straub for what was it? Just shy of $1 million, I think.
Fred's been the broker of many deals. That's what he's been, the real estate agent broker. So he's made money doing that. Actually, the individual who sells land to the county all the time is Wells Barksdale. The guy who is in the commercials with Stacey Abrams at his horse ranch here in Rockdale County, because he's got Stacey and him in the corral, and people have said that they're on the wrong side of the fence. That they shouldn't be on the outside. they needed to be on the inside of the corral, not the outside of the corral.
Right.
So there's some people said that comment on Facebook, but when we look at that, you're right. That's what we've been told all along about the courthouse thing. Problem with the courthouse deal is there's no money to be made off land deals if we build it at Parker Road because we already own the property,
That's
and
right.
there's no kickbacks to be gotten by
Yeah.
anybody. And I'm not saying who might get a kickback, but if there were a kickback to be gotten, there is none to be gotten at Parker Road because we already own the land, and that's.
Hey, it's not a proper development unless you can grease some palms and make somebody rich through some land deals.
Charlotte,
Are you really developing?
Yeah, Charlotte, are you saying there were 62 write-in votes against Richard Reed? I don't know. I don't think Tucker got that many. I think he only got 12, but I'm sure he's the only one that got multiple votes against him, and he's the only dog I'm sure that got votes.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he's still judge of all dogs.
He's judge of all dogs. We're not taking that away. He declared victory.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Democrat Party question 11.
11.
What was that question?
Should the Board of Commission turn over the day-to-day operations of the county government to a professionally trained and qualified county manager? Now, Alex, again, it's one of these surprising answers we expected, right?
Well, 63% said yes, that they should turn over day-to-day operations. But here's my question for that. Because they didn't elaborate what happens with the chairman, what happens with the board of commissioners. Because my idea for that would be to have 5 commissioners with no chair, 5 districted commissioners, or 4, whatever it is, no chairman, and the county manager does the chairman's job.
That you can do that, but you have to have a chair. But
they can elect a chair among themselves.
And that's what you do. That many counties do that. They elected, or you have counties that have a part-time chairman who only has the authority of the rest of the board.
Yeah,
and they have a little more authority because they can sign off on stuff without a limited authority chair. I would go with a limited authority chair or the elect among the 5 with the county manager having the day-to-day. I mean, there's many ways to do that and minimize that chair's responsibility.
Yeah,
and that's what we need to do.
The chairman should be there for one reason and one reason only, really, to run the meetings. That should be it. That should be the scope of his authority, and then the county manager. But I don't know what the Rockdale Democrats' idea or vision for that is, whether it's a county manager in addition to a county chairman with the same authority he currently has. That's a conversation to have with the Rockdale Democrat, I guess.
Well, we had some negotiations about that and they fell through, Alex, right? So, and part of the thing was that, and even Democratic members of the delegation questioned having a full-time chairman and a county manager. They actually called it double dipping.
Right. Okay. So their vision's probably the same as ours.
Their vision, they actually said that to entertain any of it, they would not feel comfortable with a full-time chairman and a full-time county manager because they felt that was double dipping. So there would have to be some reduction in power. I don't think they were going to go the full extent of the person just running the meeting. I think they were more leaning toward electing a chairman, the chairman being part-time, having limited authority. And I'm good with that. I'm good with that also. As long as the county manager has the day-to-day operational authority.
Yeah, and no, Catherine, the manager would be hired. It would be a hired position, not an elected position. And hopefully we would end up with a good one. But if you don't, the beauty of a hired position is they can be replaced. Now, you wouldn't know it based on the school superintendent and the abysmal job he's been doing, but then he can only be replaced by elected officials. So
that's something we're going to talk about the school board race after we get finished the questions too.
So question, I think we're up to question 12, is it?
It's the last one. And this is an interesting question also. I like this question. Should a volunteer board of Rockdale County residents be created to provide public oversight and reporting regarding the financial operations of Rockdale County government, with appointments to the board made independent of the Board of Commissioners? This is
83% say yes. 83% say yes.
that there should be a citizens advisory board that's appointed by somebody other than the commissioners.
Other than the Board of Commissioners, yeah. Which, it goes to Charlotte's question, hired by who? The Board of Commissioners. Yeah, I would assume that the Board of Commissioners would be responsible for hiring the county manager.
In all counties that have a county manager, the Board of Commission has to hire the county manager. It doesn't make any sense not for that, because that person has to work with and answer to. That person is not the person who sets the rules or sets the policy or sets anything. They actually work for the Board of Commission, and they follow the bylaws and the ordinances and the rules set in place by the Board of Commission. They have not the authority to actually do anything on their own. It's only to run the government by the rules that's set by the elected officials.
Right. So 83% of Democrats, including, by the way, our own finance director, believe that there should be a citizen oversight committee to keep an eye on the finances of Rockdale County. Because let's not forget, it was our own finance director who said that it's current mismanagement of money that's got us into the position we're in today.
And then, Al, did he not say during one of those PFA hearings that he may have overspoke when he spoke to some citizens?
That's what he said.
They said he may have overspoke.
That's what he said. They reined him in somewhat, is what happened. But listen, he was being candid. I believe his initial statement that we need oversight, that these Board of Commissioners are, what was it? He said they're financially inept.
Yeah.
This Board of Commissioners, they have no idea what they're doing when it comes to the finances of Rockdale County. And I think that's evidenced by what we're about to see happen with this PFA and the bonds they're about to issue.
Yeah, and Catherine Lynn said it's telling that question was asked by the. It is.
Well, they asked it because of that recording we played, Larry.
Yeah, yes.
That's why the question was asked. It's additional pressure now on the county. Now they can say, well, listen, our own finance director said we need it. 83% of Democrats in the county say we need it. Let's have it. We won't.
No,
it's not going to happen.
Well, I did reach out to some legislators today and talk to them about the exemption for seniors. And I was told that will be going back into the legislative process in January. So they're.
Yeah. And, hopefully, I think if anyone does pay attention to this, it will be members of the local legislation who keep an eye on these numbers, specifically the Democrat numbers, because, they don't care. Well, having said that, in the general election, when there's no Republican on the ballot, yeah, it ain't going to make any difference to them. Maybe in a primary, they could think, man, what if Republicans jump over to vote for us? But that's unlikely as well. Yeah, no, they're not going to pay attention to Republicans. They're going to pay attention to the Democrat questions. And these are quite telling.
Yeah,
they're pretty telling.
And then also, and I'm going to tell you, Al, we're going to work on these issues with the Rockdale voter. And we're getting ready to put our advisory. We've got members of what we call our advisory board, right? The majority, what we discovered that the board we're putting together, most of the members of our advisory board are Democrats of the nonpartisan group. So, and it was like when people we asked and talked to, and we see that, this advisory board is going to be made up mostly of Democrats. That's going to be a great thing,
Well, it should represent the makeup of the county, which is approximately 2/3 Democrat.
And it's going to. It's actually the board is going to represent that, and I'm excited about it. And when that exemption thing we're going to start on that in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think
We're
it's
we're going
important
to
to
do
do
a
that.
petition and stuff, and that's what we're going to do. I was going to let everybody know too, Alex. And July is coming up, and we are not doing a booth this July. The Republican Party, but the Rockdale voter. We're going to have members of the Rockdale voter group with petitions.
Mhm.
We're going to be doing the Richard Oden petition asking for the forensic audit. So
Okay.
we will have members of the Rockdale voter group with clipboards at the Red, White, Bang and Boom show or whatever it is. That will be getting signatures for the forensic audit for Richard Oden's thing that
Yeah.
he asked the Rockdale voter to help.
Yeah. And listen, it's important to do that because look, we're both board members of the Republican Party. But the things we've worked on locally have been to benefit all taxpayers, not just Republican taxpayers. It's to benefit all taxpayers. And I know for a fact that there are a lot of Democrats that have appreciated what we've tried to do because it also benefits them. A lot of them feel like they're voiceless, like they can't speak up because if they do, they're ostracized. Well, I don't care if I'm ostracized. It doesn't matter to me in the least bit, to be honest with you. I put my voice where I think it will make the most impact for the most people, as do you, Larry. And everything we've worked on, it hasn't been partisan, hasn't been a Republican issue. It's been a county issue. It's been a taxpayer issue. And all taxpayers matter, Republican and Democrat. Every single one of them matter.
Hey, Alex, I want to ask you a question. I mean, I don't talk about this a lot, but I'm going to go ahead and talk about it on air for a minute. Do you know how much heat I take a lot of times from Republicans who reach out to me for the things I do?
Sure, absolutely.
Last week alone, I had some long-term members of the party say they're never going to join again, and they'll vote Republican in the general election, but they're going to wash their hands of the local party.
Right. Yeah, and it's sad. It's a shame that people can't see for local issues, for local taxpayers. It's a shame that people can't see beyond that party line because there's a whole wide world out there beyond that party line that affects every single one of us. And listen, we have a Democrat administration. They're hurting everyone. They're hurting Republicans and Democrats. Every single one of them needs relief. Every Republican homeowner, every Democrat homeowner, every Republican renter, Democrat renter, they all need some kind of relief in this county, and it's not coming.
I
All
have
we
said
can
this.
do,
I've
all
said
we
this
can
many
do is
times.
try to put a little bit of pressure on people to try to get that relief.
I've said this many times. It's about community, not about party when it's local.
Right.
It's about community. Let's look real quick at the Board of Education race, and then that'll be the last thing we do.
County School Board,
Yep.
post 1, post 2. Let me pull those up here.
That one was uncontested.
Yeah,
So,
uncontested. Post 2, Tony Dowdy, Janie Jones, and Tommy Plummer. Janie Jones.
the last 2 weeks of that election, Alex, I'm going to tell you what, I saw Janie Jones coming on strong. I could have actually predicted. I could have predicted that. Tony was declining, and actually, I saw. Tommy's a good friend of mine. And I actually voted for Tommy. Not going to say I didn't. I did, but I saw the winds a blow. Okay, and how that was happening because she picked up steam, and when that runoff happens, and you'll see that's going to be Tony Dowdy, and that's going to be Janie Jones in that runoff. Janie Jones is going to win that runoff. Just going to point blank because I think that when they had that forum, and Tony Dowdy stood up there and said his job was to back the superintendent and go along with him, that spread throughout the community. Just that's when the tide changed. It really changed in that election with that debate and that sort of sentiment alone. that my job is to support and back the school superintendent. I don't agree with that. I think the job of the school board is to direct the school superintendent.
Yes.
They're his boss.
Yeah. Which Republican question was the superintendent question? Number 10?
That was number 12. No. Hold on. No. Number. Hold on a second. Number 11.
Number 11. 61%. 61% wanted or would like to see the Rockdale County School Superintendent replaced.
I'm just going to read the quick, because the question wasn't a weak asked question. It was a pretty strong question. Do you believe the Rockdale County Board of Education should replace Terry Oates as school superintendent of Rockdale County?
Yeah.
I mean, it was not a weak question, strong question.
61%, and Democrats wish that question would have been on their ballot as well. The Board of Education should be paying attention to that. And if you're insisting on running on I support the superintendent no matter what platform, it might come back to bite you.
When you make that statement and the Republican Party itself say no, you know what I mean? They say no, firing. 61% say replacing. And then you've got the Democrats asking, we wanted to ask that question. We're not pleased with how education is going in this county. There is a very strong sentiment of, like Dan says, that's a non-confidence vote. Oh, yeah. There's a non-confidence feeling in the community regarding, and I think I think this is actually this board race. I actually think Tony Dowdy was probably the front runner until that happened, Alex.
Yeah.
I think he was the front runner until he got up there, he made that comment, and then he just talked about how great the school system was when he was there. And if we look back, and he made one of those comments about they lowered the millage rate every time, and that was during that time when they were doing that 0.1% nonsense so that Autry could get his bonuses also.
Right.
So, I mean, and then talked about these self-given awards that they give themselves all the time. I mean, you and I both know none of that stuff is real.
Right. Yeah, 1/10 of a mil. They'll lower it by 1/10 of a mil, the bare minimum, just so that the superintendent can meet his bonus.
Yeah, Dan Burks makes a good point. He did not see the unpopularity of Oates, because you talk about this all the time, Alex, when they live in their own echo chamber.
Right.
And they live in that echo chamber, and they see how popular they think they are, and their own, and then they don't get it.
When you're on a board that excludes the public from their meetings, that puts extreme restrictions on what the public can say or do at those meetings, puts restrictions on public comment, won't dare air those meetings online where people can watch and comment. When you do things like that, you create an echo chamber, and you end up thinking you're a lot more important, you're a lot more valuable to people than you actually are.
And they make their members sign an ethics agreement that forbids them from discussing anything as an individual.
Right.
I didn't elect that board as a
whole. Exactly.
When I voted for individuals.
Yep.
Just to let you know, if anybody cares to know, I intend on voting for Janie Jones in the runoff, just so that anybody knows. Just so I want it out there. I mean, I'm not embarrassed about what I'm going to do.
Hey, listen, Dowdy outed himself as an Oates man. He's in Terry Oates' pocket. Dowdy doesn't need that job anymore. I'm sorry, he just doesn't.
Alex, anybody who's ever watched me on this show or heard me talk for the last 2 years, would there be any doubt of how I feel about Terry Oates?
No.
Not on
Shouldn't
the
be.
oats, not on the oats wagon, right?
There shouldn't be. And listen, we both said, let's give him a couple of years. Give him, what was it? I think we said 3 years, 2
And
years.
we did. We gave him 3 years. I didn't start it till last year. He's been chairman. He's been the superintendent for over 4 years now. I
Yeah.
gave him his 3 years.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, it's just been a gradual decline. And while they've manipulated the numbers so he can make his bonus. Another superintendent running our school. We used to have a really good school system in Rockdale. We don't anymore.
Alex, I went to a graduation Saturday of my nephew. He graduated from a high school in Oconee County. And you know that Diggs report that they said's irrelevant or whatever? Well, that's irrelevant, okay? This principal got up. Actually, it's his last year as principal because he got another job. Well, one of the local counties actually stole him as to make him their superintendent. But that high school what would you guess that they're ranked by that report?
Oh, I have no idea.
Ranked number 1 in the state of Georgia.
Are they really?
Really, ranked number 1 in the state of Georgia, Alex, and so. Ranked number 1 in the state of Georgia, and you know what? For good reason, that principal was on the hunting block for counties to hire as a superintendent. When you have the number 1 high school in the state of Georgia, people are going to want you as a superintendent.
Yeah.
So he's leaving there, going to take a job as a superintendent because that report. Has his school as being the number 1 school in the state of Georgia and one of the top, I think, 25 schools in the United States.
Wow.
So, it comes down to kids can be taught things, and it's all a process, and it's because we put enough money into it to have a good educational system.
Oh, come on.
Correct, Alex?
Oh, God. It's ridiculous the amount of money we spend on public school education. It's ridiculous. Yes, they should be the best students on the face of the planet.
Money's not a problem.
Not in the least bit.
I was talking to a pretty high up state official last week, and he actually made this comment. He said, "We don't have a money problem in the state of Georgia. We have a spending problem."
Right.
We don't have a money piece. We got plenty of money.
Right.
Having enough money's not the problem. It's how and where we spend it.
Yep. Yep. It's Clayton. So it's independent. But isn't Tony Dowdy theoretically a Republican?
Yes.
Clayton says, "I'm embarrassed we don't have a Republican running for the BOC."
That's the BOC.
Board of Commissioners. Sorry, Board of Commissioners. There's no way a Republican can win in Rockdale. I mean, just look at Democrat turnout was pretty low, and they still outnumbered Republicans 2-1.
Alex, I'm gonna tell some people some numbers right now, right? Okay. In 2020, in the primary, the Republican percent that participated was 21%. This year, the numbers will come out, but I did some rough numbers. I think it's going to be 35% this time. Okay. In 2018, I was on the ballot. It's the highest it's been in these 38% Republican turnout. And I ran a really good campaign, a strong campaign. And that we had 38%, and that's the biggest number we've had in a while, right? But and he's right. I mean, I think if a Republican would run on there, we would run a good race. We get up to that 36 to 38%, but it's still not enough to cross the finish line. Right. It would help statewide candidates. It would help national candidates a little bit with a few because all those votes add up, but we just have a hard road to hoe here in Rockdale County.
I do think it's time for an independent to run.
Independent. Alex, you and I have talked about this, and I ran some numbers, right? And the Georgia legislature which is made up of Republicans and Democrats, continuously fight ballot access.
Right.
They do not want independents to be on the ballot. And if you indulge me 2 minutes, I'll tell you why. Let's just say Rockdale County, it's a Democrat county. If we had an individual run for, let's just say, tax commissioner, and they ran as an independent, and they ran, and there was no Republican on the ballot, and they ran against a Democrat. So with there being no Republican on the ballot, most likely between 85 and 90% of Republicans in a general election are not going to vote for that Democrat. They're going to see an independent on there. They're going to vote for that independent, probably 85 to 90%. If we look at the Democrat races, when Democrats run against each other or when Republicans do oppose when Democrats don't get 100% of their own vote. Right. They lose between 20 and 30%. Most Democrats will get 70 to 75% in a general election. Strong county. If you add that 85 and that 25 to 26%, that independent candidate just beat that Democrat incumbent tax commissioner. Right. That's why Republicans and Democrats at the state legislature don't want independents to run. They don't want independents to run because the party that's on the out that has no candidate, their people are going to vote, and then enough of the ruling party's people will vote for independents, and you have an independent sneaking in, winning tax commissioner or sheriff or something like that. It would, I believe, a true independent would have a chance of actually winning the election.
I mean, didn't Brian Jenkins run as an independent, try to get ballot access?
No, that was Courtney Dillard. But he didn't run as he ran as an independent Democrat. And then he failed because they said he didn't get enough ballots.
Didn't get the questions.
And then he did a write-in candidacy, and he got over 2,000 votes as a write-in. Mm-hmm. And that was for somebody that you've got to go out of your way to do that, right? That was a strong showing for a write-in candidate. Mm-hmm. So that showed me at that point that actually.
Well, imagine if you had ballot access.
If he had ballot access, he would have made that a race.
Yep, I agree.
Well, I'm done spouting for the evening, Alex. We've actually went over a little bit, but we've kept the audience and grew it. So I mean, what can you say about that? People wanted to hear about this tonight.
Yep.
They wanted to know.
I mean, it is what it is. And the people voted, the people spoke. We now have a PFA and a SPLOST. So there's 2 additional taxes. You're welcome, Rockdale. And all we can do now is see what the future brings us.
Well,
it's going to bring us some pain, I think, some fiscal pain.
Not only that, Alex, remember, we just gave every county employee a raise.
Yeah. And
when they gave that raise, they point blank said, we're going to have to raise the millage rate to keep that going.
Yep.
Lisa Lancaster, I'm glad you don't agree with the independent thing, but my numbers say it's accurate. So we just may have to test it. And I know why you don't. It's because of Justin, but that wasn't a true independent run. Just saying. But that's the way it goes. So, Alex, I'm going to tell everybody good night. Tell them good night, and I'm going to say good night.
Well, thank you, Larry. Thank you, everyone, for allowing me to be on here. I appreciate it. Larry, let's move on to the next thing.
We'll move on to the next thing. Thanks, guys. I thank every one of you guys for attending tonight, showing up. We couldn't do these kind of shows without you and without your input, and then without you just sharing it with everybody and letting everybody know that we exist. So I look forward to seeing each and every one of you on Sunday, on the Sunday edition, and talk to you later. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, guys.